I signed the paper that would take my house away. My daughter-in-law watched my hand the entire time, her smile slow, patient, almost satisfied. My son sat beside her, not looking at me, just nodding when the lawyer spoke, as if everything had already been decided long before I walked into that room. I didn't ask questions. I didn't argue. I just adjusted my glasses and read every line. And then, right before I signed, I added one sentence. They didn't notice. Not then. Follow my story until the end and tell me where you're watching from. I've learned that distance doesn't matter. Betrayal travels just fine on its own. The lawyer cleared his throat and slid the document closer to me. The sound of paper against polished wood echoed louder than it should have. Or maybe the room was just too quiet. It hadn't always been like this. There used to be laughter in rooms like this. Warmth. My husband, Richard, would have made a joke to break the tension, something about lawyers charging by the minute. He had a way of making even serious moments feel human. But Richard had been gone for 8 months, and silence had taken his place. I placed my hand on the edge of the table. It trembled slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But I felt it. A small, steady vibration under the skin, like something trying to break through. "Mom, it's just a formality," my son Daniel said. He still didn't look at me. That was new. Daniel used to look at me when he spoke, even when he lied as a child, especially then. He'd meet my eyes like he was daring me to see through him. Now he couldn't. "It'll make things easier," my daughter-in-law Claire added. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "Maintenance, taxes, all of that can be handled more efficiently this way." Efficient. That was her word for everything. Efficient meant control. Efficient meant quiet changes that no one questioned until it was too late. I nodded slowly, as if I were considering it for the first time. But I wasn't, because this wasn't the first time something felt off. The lawyer shifted in his chair. He was younger than I expected, early 40s maybe, clean suit, careful posture, the kind of man who followed procedures exactly as written. But even he hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "If you're comfortable, Mrs. Whitmore, you can sign here." Comfortable. I almost smiled. Instead, I picked up the pen. It was heavier than it should have been, or maybe my hand had grown lighter. I lowered the tip to the paper, but didn't write. Not yet. Because something about the wording had caught my attention. Not the legal terms. I'd seen enough documents in my lifetime to recognize those patterns. No, it was something smaller. A phrase tucked between paragraphs. Easy to overlook if you weren't looking for it. But I was. Because Claire had started helping with my paperwork 3 months after Richard passed. At first, it was small things. Paying bills, organizing files, sitting beside me at the kitchen table, her manicured nails tapping lightly against envelopes as she said, "You shouldn't have to worry about all this anymore." I let her. Of course I did. That's what mothers do. We let go slowly, carefully. We convince ourselves it's love when it starts to feel like distance. But then the changes became quieter. Bank statements stopped arriving in the mail. Daniel stopped mentioning certain things. And Claire, she started speaking for him. Always with that same calm tone. Always with that same smile. I pressed the pen slightly harder against the page. "Everything okay?" Claire asked. I looked up. She was watching me again. Not Daniel, not the lawyer. Just me. As if this moment mattered more than anything else. "It's a lot to read," I said. She laughed softly. "That's why we have professionals." The lawyer gave a polite nod, but he didn't smile. Interesting. I glanced back down. The sentence was still there, waiting. It wasn't wrong, And that's when I realized something. They weren't expecting me to read it. They were expecting me to trust them. That was the plan. Not force, not pressure, just assumption. And that's where they made their mistake. I adjusted my glasses again, slower this time. I just want to make sure everything reflects what we discussed, I said. Claire's smile tightened, just a fraction. Of course. Daniel shifted in his seat. His knee bounced once under the table before going still. He still wouldn't look at me. I reached for the margin. Do you mind if I clarify something here? I asked, tapping lightly near the bottom of the page. The lawyer leaned forward. What would you like to add? Claire spoke before I could answer. It's standard wording, she said. There's really no need to. I prefer to be precise, I interrupted gently. Silence followed. Not long, but long enough. The lawyer hesitated again, then nodded. As long as all parties agree, a minor addition can be noted. All parties. I turned slightly toward Daniel. He froze for a second, then nodded. Yeah, that's fine. Still not looking at me. I wrote slowly, carefully, each word deliberate, each letter shaped the way Richard had taught me years ago, when we signed the papers for this very house, back when everything felt permanent, back when signatures meant something simple. Now they meant something else entirely. I finished the sentence, lifted the pen, and then I signed. Claire exhaled, not loudly, but enough for me to hear it, enough to know she'd been holding her breath. The lawyer gathered the papers, tapping them into a neat stack. Well, he said, that should take care of everything. Everything. Such a simple word. I folded my hands in my lap and leaned back in my chair. I didn't look at Claire. I didn't look at Daniel. I just watched the papers disappear into a folder. Because the truth was, nothing had been taken from me. Not yet. And they had no idea what I had just put into motion. But that wasn't the moment everything changed. Not yet. The real shift came when the lawyer started reading it back. The lawyer didn't start reading immediately. He adjusted the stack of papers first, aligned the corners, smoothed the edges with the flat of his hand, like he was preparing something delicate, something that could fall apart if handled too quickly. That was the moment I knew. Something had shifted. Not enough for Claire to notice, but enough for me. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Is everything good? He asked. His voice was too casual, too rehearsed. The lawyer gave a small nod. Yes, just reviewing the final version for the record. For the record. Claire relaxed back into her chair. One leg crossed over the other, her heel dangling loosely from her foot. She looked comfortable again. That didn't last long. I folded my hands in my lap, still, calm, waiting, because I knew what was coming, just not how quickly it would unfold. The lawyer cleared his throat again. Then he began. This document outlines the transfer of property located at... His voice was steady, professional, neutral. He continued through the first paragraph without pause. Legal descriptions, dates, ownership structure. Claire nodded along, as if she'd heard it all before. Maybe she had. Daniel stayed quiet, still not looking at me. That hadn't changed. But then, the lawyer slowed, just slightly, barely noticeable, unless you were listening for it. And with the inclusion of an additional clause, as requested, Claire's heel stopped moving, just for a second. What clause? She asked. Her tone was light, too light. The lawyer glanced down, then continued reading. Any transfer of ownership shall remain conditional upon the original grantor retaining full residential rights, financial oversight, and final authority over sale or modification of the property. Claire's posture shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough for the air in the room to tighten. Including the right to revoke or amend said transfer at any time, without prior notice, should any party act against the expressed interest or well-being of the grantor. Silence followed. A long one. The kind that doesn't announce itself. It just settles. Daniel blinked. Once. Then again. "What does that mean?" he asked. He finally looked at me, for the first time that day. I met his eyes, and held them. "It means," I said quietly, "nothing changes, unless I say it does." Claire let out a short laugh, sharp, dismissive. That's not how property transfers work. Her voice had lost its softness. Just a little. The lawyer didn't respond right away. He flipped back a page, read it again, carefully. "It's unconventional," he admitted. Unconventional. That was one word for it. "But it is legally binding," he added. That was the word that mattered. Claire's smile disappeared. Not all at once. Just piece by piece. Like something being erased. "That clause wasn't in the draft," she said. No accusation. Just a statement. But her eyes had changed. I watched her carefully. Because this was the first real crack. "I added it," I said. Simple, clear. No apology. Daniel shifted again. "Mom, why would you do that?" His voice was softer now. Confused. Almost careful. I tilted my head slightly, the way I used to when he was younger, when he'd come home with a story that didn't quite make sense. "Because I wanted to be precise," I said. The same words I'd used before. But they landed differently now. Claire leaned forward, both feet on the floor. No more relaxed posture. "That defeats the purpose of the transfer," she said. There it was. Not concern. Not confusion. Purpose. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. Silence again. Heavier this time. The lawyer closed the folder halfway. Not fully. Just enough to pause things. "Would you like me to explain the implications?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. Daniel didn't answer. So I did. "No," I said. "I understand them." And I did. More than they realized. Because this wasn't about stopping them. Not entirely. It was about changing the rules. Quietly. Without raising my voice. Without making a scene. Claire stood up. Too quickly. Her chair scraped against the floor. A sharp sound. Out of place. "This doesn't make sense," she said. Now her voice was tighter, controlled, but strained. "We agreed on a full transfer." "We." I glanced at Daniel. He looked down again. Of course he did. "I don't remember agreeing to that," I said. Another simple sentence. Another shift. Claire turned to him. "Daniel?" He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. "I thought it was implied," he said. Implied. That word again. Always something unsaid. Always something assumed. That was their strategy. Until now. Claire pressed her lips together. Thinking. Calculating. I could almost see it. All the quiet plans. All the small steps. Rearranging themselves in her mind. Looking for a way around what I'd just done. "There has to be a way to revise it," she said finally. The lawyer shook his head slightly. "Not without all parties agreeing again." All parties. That phrase again. It sounded different this time. Heavier. Claire turned back to me. And for the first time, she didn't smile. "Are you saying you don't trust us?" she asked. There it was. The question she'd been building toward. Not about the house. Not about the paperwork. About control. I didn't answer right away. I reached for my purse instead, opened it slowly, took out a folded piece of paper, set it on the table. Didn't slide it toward them. Not yet. Trust, I said quietly, isn't something you explain. I looked at Daniel, then back at Claire. It's something you recognize when it's missing. Claire's eyes flickered. Just once. To the paper. Then back to me. What is that? She asked. I rested my hand on top of it, not hiding it, not revealing it. Just there. Something I should have looked at sooner, I said. Daniel leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? I didn't answer him. Not yet. Because this wasn't the moment. Not fully. The lawyer watched the exchange carefully, more alert now, more aware. Good. I stood up slowly. My chair didn't make a sound. I think we're done here for today, I said. Claire blinked. That's it? Her voice almost rose. Almost. Yes, I said. I picked up my purse, left the paper where it was, on the table, between us. I'll be in touch, I added. Then I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. Not Daniel, not Claire, not the lawyer, but I could feel it. That shift, that moment where something invisible becomes real. I reached the door, my hand on the handle, and then I paused, just long enough, because there was one more thing they needed to understand, without me saying it directly. I glanced back over my shoulder. At my age, I said, you learn to read what isn't written. I opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me. But that paper I left on the table, that was the part they hadn't prepared for. And by the time they opened it, it would already be too late. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No one followed. That was the first confirmation. I stood in the hallway for a moment longer than necessary, my hand still resting on the handle. The building smelled faintly of polish and old carpet, clean, controlled, predictable, unlike what I had just left behind. I didn't rush. I adjusted my coat, smoothed the sleeve, checked my purse as if I'd forgotten something. I hadn't. I just needed a second, because timing mattered now, and I had just changed it. I walked toward the elevator slowly, each step measured. The kind of people assume means weakness. It doesn't. It means you're thinking. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Empty. Good. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed, and only then, I allowed myself to exhale. Not relief, not quite, something quieter. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. The paper I left behind, that was just the beginning. I reached my car 10 minutes later. Same parking spot. Same cracked line on the asphalt I'd parked beside for years. Some things don't change, not unless someone forces them to. I sat inside without starting the engine, hands resting on the steering wheel. Still, waiting, because I knew what would happen next. Not exactly how, but enough. Claire wouldn't wait long. She never did. Patience wasn't her strength. Control was, and I had just interrupted it. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. No missed calls. Not yet. I set it back down, looked straight ahead, watched nothing and everything. Because this part, this quiet part, was where most people make mistakes. They react too soon. They explain. They fix things that aren't broken. I had done that once, a long time ago. Not anymore. The phone rang, right on time. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then answered. Hello? Silence. Just for a second. Then, what did you do? Claire. No greeting, no softness, straight to the point. I leaned back in my seat, adjusted the rearview mirror slightly. I signed the document, I said. Calm, flat. You know what I mean, she snapped. There it was, the crack. Small, but growing. I added a sentence, I said. You had no right. I had every right. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Silence again. Shorter this time. More tense. That clause changes everything, she said. Yes. Another pause. Longer. She's realizing it now, I thought. Not out loud. Just noting it. Why would you do that? She asked. Different tone now. Less sharp. More careful. Good. Because I read what I was signing, I said. That's not the point. It is to me. Her breath came through the phone. Sharp. Controlled. She trusted that tone, I realized. She used it often. The one that makes people second-guess themselves. The one that sounds reasonable, even when it isn't. But I wasn't second-guessing anything. Not anymore. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. There it was again. Efficient. Simple. Convenient. For her. I don't find clarity difficult, I replied. You're not being clear, she said quickly. I'm being precise. Silence. That word again. She remembered it. Of course she did. Daniel is confused, she said. A shift. Not about her anymore. About him. He should be, I said. You're upsetting him. I didn't notice you were concerned about that before. That landed. I heard it. In the way she didn't respond immediately. In the way the silence stretched. Just a second longer than before. We're trying to help you, she said finally. Help. That word again. Always the same. Always wrapped in something that sounded generous, but never felt that way. I'm sure that's what you believe, I said. That's not fair. No, I said. It's accurate.
Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Then, what was that paper you left on the table? She asked. There it was. The real question. Not the clause. Not the transfer. The paper. I glanced at the empty passenger seat, as if it were still there. It wasn't. Of course not. I thought you'd have opened it by now, I said. We haven't. Interesting. You should, I said. Why? Because it answers your question. What question? I smiled slightly. She couldn't see it, but I felt it. The one you haven't asked yet, I said. Silence. Long. Tight. And then, you're playing games, she said. No, I said. I stopped doing that. Another breath. Sharper this time. What is it? She asked again. I looked out the windshield. At nothing. At everything. At this point, I said slowly, it's more about when you read it than what it says. That doesn't make sense. It will. Silent again. But different now. Less confident. Less controlled. She didn't like not knowing. That was clear. Good. Claire, I said. Her name, finally. She didn't respond. I've spent most of my life making things easier for other people, I continued. Still calm. Still steady. I'm not doing that anymore. You think this changes anything? She asked. Her voice had gone colder. Careful. Measured. I considered that. For a moment. Yes. It changes everything. Click. She hung up. I didn't move. Didn't call back. Didn't check the phone. I just sat there. Hands still. Breathing even. Because the conversation wasn't the important part. Not really. What mattered was what came next. And that was already in motion.
Inside the office, they would still be sitting there. Or maybe not. Maybe Claire had already reached for the paper. Maybe Daniel had stopped her. Maybe the lawyer had intervened. So many possibilities. But only one outcome. Because I knew what was written on that page. I had read it twice before folding it. Once at my kitchen table, and once in the car. Just to be sure. Because details matter. Especially the ones no one expects you to notice. I started the engine. The car hummed quietly. Familiar. Steady. Reliable. I backed out of the parking space slowly, checked the mirrors, turned onto the street. Normal movements. Routine. That's how you move when everything is about to change. You make it look like nothing is. The phone rang again. I didn't answer this time. I let it go to voicemail, because some things are better heard after the moment has passed. I drove another block before pulling over, put the car in park, then picked up the phone. One new message. I pressed play. Claire's voice. Different now. Lower. Controlled. But strained underneath. "You need to come back," she said. A pause. Longer than before. "We need to talk about this." I listened to the end. No threats. No explanations. Just that. Interesting. I deleted the message. Set the phone down. Looked ahead. Because I knew something she didn't. Something she was about to discover. That paper wasn't just a warning. It wasn't just information. It was proof. And once she saw it, everything she thought she had already secured would start to unravel. But the real problem for her wasn't what was written on it. It was when it had been written. And that was the part she hadn't even considered. I didn't drive home. Not right away. Instead, I took the long way. 2 extra turns. 1 unnecessary stoplight. A slower road that ran past the park where Richard used to walk every morning, rain or shine. I didn't look at the park. I didn't need to, because I already knew what it looked like. Still, unchanged, like everything that pretends time doesn't move. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel just slightly, because something else had changed, and this time, I had done it on purpose. By the time I reached my street, the sun had shifted just enough to cast long shadows across the lawns. Everything looked normal. Of course it did. That's the trick. The world doesn't pause just because something important happens. It keeps moving. Quietly. Indifferently. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house sat exactly as I had left it. White siding. Blue shutters. The same porch light Richard insisted on fixing himself, even when his hands had started to shake. I stayed in the car for a moment, listening to the silence, because this was the last place they thought I still controlled. And they were almost right. I stepped out slowly, closed the door without slamming it, walked up the front steps, each one familiar, each one steady. I unlocked the door, turned the handle, and stepped inside. Nothing had been moved, not yet, but something felt different. Not in the room, in me, because I wasn't walking into this house the same way I used to. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I set my purse on the kitchen counter, the same counter where Claire used to sit, tapping her nails against unpaid bills she had already decided to take over. I could almost hear it. That quiet, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. "I'll handle this," she would say. And I let her. Of course I did, because it sounded like help. But help doesn't erase things without asking. I opened the drawer beside the sink, the one no one else ever used. Inside, everything was still there, exactly where I left it. Folders, envelopes, keys, order, control. Hidden in plain sight. I pulled out the thin blue folder, the edges slightly worn. Not from age, from use. Because I had opened it more times in the last 2 weeks than I had in the past 10 years. That wasn't an accident. I carried it to the table, sat down, didn't rush. I opened it slowly. The first page was still on top, the one I had left behind in the lawyer's office. A copy. Not the original. Of course not. I don't leave originals behind. Not anymore. I ran my fingers lightly over the paper, feeling the indentation of the pen strokes, the weight of each word. Because what was written there hadn't been written today. That was the part they didn't understand. The phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at it. Because I already knew who it was and what they wanted. Answers. Control.
a way to reverse something they didn't see coming. But that window had already closed, quietly, without a sound. I turned the page. The second document underneath was older, not by years, by weeks. Still recent enough to matter, old enough to prove intent. That's what made it dangerous. I read the first line again, not because I needed to, because I wanted to remember exactly how it felt the first time. That moment when everything stopped making sense, and then suddenly made too much.
It had been a Tuesday, late afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel hadn't called in days. Claire had stopped coming by without notice, which, at the time, felt like relief. It wasn't. It was preparation. I didn't know that yet. Not until I checked the mail. There had been fewer envelopes than usual. Bills, advertisements, nothing important, except one. Thin, official, forwarded. That was what caught my attention. Forwarded, from my address to another. I turned it over, read the label again. My name, my house, redirected, without my signature. That was the first moment, the first crack. I didn't react. I didn't call. I didn't confront. I just placed it on the table and waited, because sometimes what doesn't arrive tells you more than what does. The next day, I checked the mailbox again. Nothing. Not unusual, but it felt different, because now I was looking, really looking, not assuming, not trusting, observing. And that's when I noticed it. A small, almost invisible change. The lock on the mailbox had been replaced. Same color, same shape, different key. I stood there longer than necessary, holding the old key in my hand, turning it once, twice. It didn't fit. Of course it didn't. I closed the blue folder, slowly, because that memory still felt sharp. Not painful, just clear, too clear to ignore. The phone buzzed again, longer this time, persistent. I picked it up, looked at the screen. Daniel, not Claire. That was new. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Hi, Mom. His voice was softer, careful, like he was stepping into something he didn't fully understand. Hello, Daniel. Silence, short, but noticeable. You left, he said. Yes? We needed to talk. We still can. Not now. I didn't say that part out loud. He hesitated. I don't understand what's happening. That was honest. I could hear it. For the first time in a while. I know, I said. Another pause. Longer. Claire's upset, he added. Of course she was. She's trying to fix things, he continued. Fix. That word again. Always after something is already broken. What exactly is she trying to fix? I asked. He didn't answer right away, because he didn't know. Not fully. That clause, he said finally. It changes everything. Yes. I kept my voice even, measured, like before. Why would you do that? He asked. Same question, different tone, less control, more confusion. I looked down at the blue folder, resting quietly on the table, because the answer wasn't simple. Not anymore. Daniel, I said, when was the last time you saw the original deed to this house? Silence. Long. Heavy. I don't know, he admitted. Of course he didn't. Did Claire ever show it to you? I asked. Another pause. Shorter. No. There it was. The second crack. Small, but real. I leaned back in my chair. Let the silence sit between us. Because sometimes, you don't need to explain anything. You just need to let people hear what they're not saying. Mom, he started, then stopped.
because he didn't know how to finish that sentence. Not yet. Read the paper I left, I said. Soft. Clear. No interruptions. What is it? He asked. I didn't answer. Not directly. Read it, I repeated. Another pause. Then, okay. He hung up. I set the phone down, looked at the folder again. Because this was the part where everything starts to shift. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough.
I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the quiet street. Everything still in place, everything unchanged. But underneath that, something had already begun to unravel. Because the truth wasn't hidden, not really. It had just been redirected, just like that envelope, just like everything else. And now, they were about to realize where it had gone. I didn't move from the window, not right away. Across the street, Mrs. Keller was watering her roses like she always did at this hour. Same slow rhythm, same careful movements. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. She didn't look up. She never did. Because from the outside, everything still looked normal. That was the advantage. I rested my hand lightly against the glass. Cool, steady, real. Because inside this house, things had already started to shift, and they didn't even know how far it had gone.
The phone stayed silent for almost 20 minutes, long enough to matter, short enough to confirm. They were reading it now. Not reacting, not calling, reading. That was good, because the first reaction is always the wrong one, and Claire, she didn't like being wrong. I returned to the table, sat down again, opened the blue folder, not because I needed to check anything, because I wanted to stay ahead. That's the difference. Before, I used to wait for things to happen. Now, I was watching them form. There's a difference, a quiet one, but it changes everything. The document on top wasn't complicated, not at first glance. That was intentional. No dramatic language, no accusations, just facts, dates, signatures, transfers. Small movements that, on their own, meant nothing, but together, they told a story, one that didn't match what Claire had been saying, or what Daniel believed. And that's where things become dangerous, not when something is wrong, but when it's provable.
The phone rang again. I didn't wait this time. I answered. Mom? Daniel. Breathing slightly faster, not panicked, but close. I read it, he said. Of course he did. And? I asked. Silence. Then, this doesn't make sense. There it was. The first fracture. It does, I said. You had another copy of the deed? He asked. His voice tightened on the word deed. Careful. Measured. Like he was trying not to accuse me. Yes. Pause. Why didn't you tell us? I tilted my head slightly, as if he were in the room with me. As opposed to what? I asked. Keeping it hidden? I wasn't hiding anything. Another pause. Longer. You never showed it, he said. Neither did Claire. That landed. I heard it. In the silence that followed. In the way he didn't respond immediately. In the way his breath shifted just slightly. Because now, he was thinking, not reacting. That's when things change. She said everything was already transferred, he said finally. She said a lot of things, I replied. That wasn't an argument, just a statement. She handled the paperwork, he added. Of course she did. That's what she told you, I said. Silence. Again. But different this time. Less certain. More unsettled. I leaned forward slightly, rested my elbow on the table, because this was the moment, not the confrontation, the realization. They changed the mailing address, I said. What? 3 weeks ago. Pause. What are you talking about? I let the silence sit for just a second longer. Then, my documents stopped coming here, I said. Another pause. sharp. That's not possible, he said. It is if someone files a redirect. No response. Because he didn't know that. Claire hadn't told him that. Daniel, I said quietly, when was the last time you saw anything addressed to me arrive here? Silence. Long. Heavy. Because now he was searching his memory, looking for something that didn't exist. That's the worst kind of realization.
I thought, he started, then stopped, because the thought didn't hold. Not anymore. She said she was organizing everything, he said. Efficiently, I added. He didn't respond, because he remembered that word. I didn't sign anything for that, I continued. For what? The redirect. Silence. Again. But now it carried something else. Doubt. Not in me. In her. That paper, he said slowly. Those dates. Yes. They don't match what she told me. No. Another pause. Shorter now. Because the pieces were starting to align. You think she... I don't think, I said. I let that sit. Then added. I read. Silence. That one stayed longer. Because now, he understood. Or at least, he was starting to. She's right here, he said suddenly. A shift. Quick. Unplanned. Put her on, I said. No hesitation. No fear. Just readiness. There was movement on the other end. A muffled voice. Then, hello? Claire. Different now. Controlled, but tight underneath. You've read it, I said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. Short. Careful. And? I asked. Pause. Longer than before. Because now she knew. This wasn't about convincing me. Not anymore. That document doesn't prove anything, she said. There it was. Defense. Not denial. Interesting. It proves enough, I said. For what? For clarity. She let out a breath. Not sharp. Measured. You're misunderstanding what you're looking at. I don't think I am. You always trusted me with these things. Past tense. That was new. I trusted what I could verify, I said. And now you don't? I didn't answer. Because that wasn't the question that mattered.
That redirect was temporary, she said. A new angle. It was meant to simplify without telling me. Pause. Short. But it broke her rhythm. I was going to explain it, she said. When? Silence. That one stayed. Because there was no answer. Not a real one. You're overreacting, she added. There it was. The familiar shift. From explanation to control. I leaned back in my chair. Calm. Still, I haven't reacted at all, I said. Another pause. Then, this doesn't change anything, she said, her voice steadier now. She was trying to regain ground. The transfer still stands. I smiled slightly. Again, she couldn't see it. No, I said. It doesn't. Silence. Then, what does that mean? Careful. Measured. Almost cautious now. Good. It means, I said slowly, you acted before you had the right to. That's not true. It's documented. Another pause. Short. But sharper. Those dates can be interpreted in different ways, she said. Of course. That was her strength. Language. Framing. Control. Not legally, I replied. That landed. Harder this time. I think we should all sit down and go through this together, she said. A reset attempt. Back to control. Back to structure. I looked down at the folder. Closed it. Gently. That's already happened, I said. And now? I stood up. Walked back toward the window. Looked out again. Same street. Same stillness. But underneath, movement. Subtle. Unavoidable. Now, I said, we wait. For what? She asked. That was the real question. The one she didn't like asking. Because it meant she didn't know. I rested my hand lightly against the glass again. For it to catch up, I said.
Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. And then, "What did you do?" she asked. There it was. Finally. Not confident. Not controlled. Just uncertain. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not out of exhaustion. Out of precision. Because the answer mattered. And timing mattered more. "I finished what you started," I said. Then I ended the call.
The phone didn't ring again. Not immediately. That told me everything I needed to know. They were no longer reacting. They were recalculating, and that takes time. I stood there for a while, watching nothing, thinking everything. Because the truth was, this wasn't about the house. Not entirely. It was about control. And for the first time, that control wasn't in their hands anymore. But the real shift, it hadn't happened yet, not fully. Because there was still one piece they hadn't seen. And when they did, they wouldn't be asking questions anymore. They'd be looking for a way out. And that was already gone. The house was quiet again. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that waits. I stayed by the window longer than I needed to, watching the same empty stretch of street. A car passed, slowed, kept going. Nothing unusual, but that didn't mean nothing was happening. It just meant it hadn't reached the surface yet. I lowered my hand from the glass and turned back toward the table. The blue folder sat exactly where I left it, closed, still, but heavier now, because they had seen part of it, not all, not yet. I didn't open it again, not immediately. Instead, I walked into the living room, sat down in Richard's chair, not mine, his. The leather creaked slightly under my weight. Familiar, worn, steady. I rested my hands on the armrests and looked straight ahead, because this was where he used to sit when something didn't feel right. He wouldn't react, wouldn't raise his voice. He would just sit, watch, wait. And then, when the moment came, he would say one sentence that changed everything. I hadn't understood that before. Now I did. The phone didn't ring. That was the next confirmation. Claire wasn't calling again. Daniel wasn't calling again. They were doing something else. Comparing. Cross-checking. Looking for a way to make it not true. That takes time, but not much. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, picked up the folder, opened it again. This time I didn't start at the top. I flipped straight to the last page. The one I hadn't mentioned. The one I hadn't left behind. Because that would have been too obvious. Too easy. No, that part stayed with me. Always. The paper was thinner than the others. Different stock. Different formatting. Because it didn't come from the same place. Not from Claire. Not from anything she had touched. That was important. I ran my thumb lightly along the bottom edge. Felt the slight indentation where the seal had been pressed. Official. Final. Irreversible. That word matters more than people think. The doorbell rang. Once. Clear. Measured. Not rushed. I didn't move right away, because timing still mattered. I walked to the door slowly. No hesitation. No rush. And opened it. Daniel stood there. Alone. That was the first surprise. His posture was different. Less certain. Less structured. Like he had left something unfinished behind him. Or someone. "Mom?" I stepped aside. "Come in." He didn't speak as he walked past me, just moved through the house like he was seeing it differently, like he was measuring something, comparing it to what he thought it was, and what he was just beginning to realize it wasn't. He stopped in the kitchen, looked at the table, at the folder, then back at me. "She's not coming," he said. I nodded. I assumed. He let out a breath. Not frustrated, not angry. Something else. Unsteady. "We need to talk," he added. I walked past him, took my seat at the table. "I'm listening." He didn't sit right away, just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the folder again. "You knew," he said. Not a question. I didn't answer immediately,
because that word, new, can mean different things. I noticed, I said. That was more accurate. When? He asked. A few weeks ago. His jaw tightened slightly. Why didn't you say anything? There it was again, that expectation that I would react immediately. Explain. Fix it. I was still reading, I said. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I didn't have all the information yet. Silence. Short, but heavy. And now you do? He asked. I met his eyes. Yes. That answer didn't comfort him. It shifted him. I saw it. In the way his shoulders moved. In the way he finally pulled out the chair across from me and sat down.
She said the redirect was temporary, he said. I didn't respond. She said it was just to organize things better, he added. I folded my hands on the table. Did she tell you when she filed it? He hesitated. No. Did she tell you why it was filed without my signature? Another pause. Longer. No. I nodded once. Because that was enough. She didn't think it mattered, he said. There it was. The justification. Not from Claire. From him. That was new. I tilted my head slightly. Did you? He looked at me. Really looked this time. And for a second, I saw it. Not certainty. Not confidence. Doubt. I trusted her, he said. Quiet. Careful. I know. That wasn't an accusation. Just a fact. He leaned forward slightly, rested his hands on the table. She handles things, he added. Yes. And you've always let her. I didn't answer right away, because that part was true. For a while. Until I didn't. I said. That landed. I saw it.
He glanced at the folder again. What else is in there? He asked. Not demanding, not accusing, just asking. I reached forward, turned the folder slightly, but didn't open it. Not yet. Enough, I said. That's not an answer. No, I agreed. It's not. Silence, again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was building. She said you're trying to take control, he said. I almost smiled. Almost. That's an interesting way to describe reading your own documents, I replied. That's not what she meant. I know. He leaned back, exhaled slowly. She thinks you're setting a trap. There it was, finally. I looked at him, steady, calm. And what do you think? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, because now it mattered. What he thought, not what he was told. I think, he started, then stopped, because he wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. I reached for the folder, opened it, not all the way, just enough, pulled out the last page, the one he hadn't seen, and placed it on the table, between us. I didn't slide it toward him, I didn't explain it, I just left it there. He looked down at it, didn't touch it, not yet. What is this? He asked. I leaned back, watched him. Something she didn't account for, I said. His fingers hovered over the edge of the paper, then stopped. Why not just tell me? He asked. Because if I had, it would have been dismissed, explained away, rewritten, like everything else. Because you wouldn't have believed me, I said. Silence. Long. Heavy. True.
He picked up the paper, slowly, carefully, like it might change if he moved too quickly. His eyes moved across the first line, then the second. Then he stopped. Just for a second. That was all it took. What is this? He asked again. But this time, his voice had changed. Not confused. Not uncertain. Something else. Closer to understanding. You should keep reading, I said. He did. And with each line, I watched it happen. That shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Because once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. That date, he said quietly. Yes. It's before. Yes. He looked up at me, then back down, then up again. That's not possible, he said. It is. Silence. Then, she didn't. I didn't interrupt him, because he needed to finish that thought. On his own. She couldn't have, but he didn't. Because now, he was starting to understand something else. Something deeper. I folded my hands again. Waited. Because this part, you don't rush. You let it settle. You let it land. And then, what did she do? He asked. There it was. Finally. Not defensive. Not protective. Just asking. I met his eyes. Calm. Steady. Measured. I think, I said slowly, you already know. And this time, he didn't argue. But the truth? He still hadn't seen all of it. Not yet. Because what was on that page was only the beginning. And once he realized what came next, there wouldn't be anything left to question.
He didn't look up right away. Daniel kept his eyes on the paper, but I could tell he wasn't reading anymore. He was replaying, rebuilding everything he thought he understood, piece by piece. That's how it happens. Not all at once, just enough at a time to make it impossible to go back. That date, he said again, softer now, more careful. It's before the transfer paperwork. Yes. And before you were even asked to sign anything. Yes. Silence. But this time it wasn't empty. It was full of connections, of questions he didn't know how to ask yet. She filed something, he said slowly. Not to me, to himself. I didn't interrupt, because this part mattered, more than anything I could explain. She filed something, before the transfer even happened. He stopped, looked at me, and used your information. There it was. Not complete, but close enough. I held his gaze and didn't correct him, because when someone reaches the truth on their own, they don't forget it. How? He asked. That question came fast, almost too fast, because now he needed something to hold on to, a reason, an explanation, something that made this smaller. I leaned back in my chair, calm, still. She had access. I said, to what? To everything. His jaw tightened. That doesn't mean she could. It means she could try. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. He looked back down at the paper, read the line again, and this time, I saw it. The shift. Not confusion. Recognition. Because something in that wording didn't match what he had been told. She said the transfer was clean. He murmured. She said everything was handled properly. Yes. And this? He tapped the page lightly. This shows activity before authorization. Yes. Silence. Long. Heavy. That's not just a mistake, he said. No, it wasn't. I didn't say it. I didn't need to. He pushed the paper slightly away from him. Not far. Just enough. Like it had weight. Like it carried something he wasn't ready to hold yet. She wouldn't do that, he said. There it was. The last offense. Not based on evidence. On belief.
I watched him carefully, because this part is where people decide who they trust and who they don't.
Daniel, I said quietly. He didn't look up. When was the last time something didn't add up and you ignored it? That made him pause, his fingers stilled against the table, because now he wasn't looking at the paper. He was looking inward, searching. There were things, he admitted, small, reluctant, but they didn't seem important. They usually don't, I said. That's how they stay unnoticed. He nodded once, slow, because now it made sense, too much sense. She handled the accounts, he said. Yes. She changed some of the billing addresses. Yes. She said it was easier. Yes. Each answer landed softer than the last, because now he wasn't hearing me. He was hearing himself. And the mailbox? He added suddenly. I didn't react, didn't confirm, didn't deny, just waited. I remember you saying something about the key not working, he continued. I thought it was just old. He looked up at me, and this time, there was no doubt left in his eyes, only realization. That wasn't old, he said. No, it wasn't. Silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel tense anymore. It felt settled, like something had finally found its place, even if that place was uncomfortable. She moved everything, he said quietly, before the transfer. Yes. And made it look like it was part of the process? Yes. He let out a breath, long, heavy, because now there was no version of this that made sense in her favor. She knew what she was doing, he said. That wasn't a question. I didn't answer it, because now I didn't have to. He leaned back in his chair, ran a hand through his hair, looked at the ceiling, then back at me. Why didn't you stop it? He asked. There it was, the question that always comes after. Why didn't you act sooner? Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you fix it? I folded my hands again, because the answer was simple, but not easy. I wanted to see how far it would go, I said. That surprised him. I saw it, in the way his eyebrows lifted slightly. You let it happen? He asked. No. I shook my head once. I let it reveal itself. That was different. Important.
He looked back down at the paper, then at the folder, then at me. How much do you know? He asked. That question mattered, more than the others, because it wasn't about the past. It was about what came next. I didn't answer right away, because I needed him to understand something first. More than she expects, I said. That was enough. For now. And the clause? He asked. The one you added today? Yes. That wasn't just protection, was it? No, it wasn't. I met his eyes again. It was timing, I said. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, everything she set in motion now has to pass through me. Silence. Then, she won't like that. No, she wouldn't. The phone buzzed on the table. Both of us looked at it. Claire, of course. Daniel didn't reach for it. Not immediately. That was new. She's calling you, he said. I see that. He hesitated. Then, you should answer. I tilted my head slightly. Do you want me to? That question caught him off guard, because now he had to choose. Not between people, between truths. Yes, he said finally. Answer. I picked up the phone, looked at the screen, then answered. Claire. No greeting, no softness, just her name. Daniel's with you, isn't he? She asked immediately. Sharp, direct. Yes. Pause. Short, tight. You showed him something, she said. Not a question. No, I replied. I let him read. That difference mattered. That document is being taken out of context, she said. There it was. Control again. Reframing. It's in context, I said. No, it's not, she snapped. And for the first time, her voice cracked.
Just slightly, but enough. You filed before authorization, I said. Calm, measured. That's not how it works, she replied quickly. It is when the dates are documented. Silence. Then, you don't understand the process. I understand the order. That landed.
Daniel, she said suddenly, put me on speaker. He didn't move, didn't reach for the phone, just sat there, watching me, waiting. I can hear you, he said, flat, controlled. That was new, very new. Then listen, she said, fast, urgent now. That paper doesn't prove intent. No, I said. It proves sequence. Silence. And this time, she didn't interrupt. That's enough, she said finally, low, controlled again. I'm coming over. There it was. Movement. Action. Too late. I glanced at Daniel. He didn't look surprised. He looked prepared. That's fine, I said, and ended the call. The room went quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This one had direction, momentum, because now, everything was about to come into the same place, at the same time. Daniel looked at the paper one more time, then folded it carefully, set it back on the table. She's going to try to fix this, he said. Yes. She's going to explain it. Yes. He looked at me. Steady. Clear. And you're not going to let her. I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. Engine off. Door closing. Footsteps. Fast. Precise. Familiar. I stood up, smoothed my sleeve, and walked toward the front door. Because this time, she wasn't walking into a situation she controlled, and she had no idea how much she had already lost. The knock wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. 3 short taps. Even. Controlled. That was Claire. Always precise. Always measured. Even now. I opened the door before she could knock again. She stood there, one hand still raised, her expression already arranged into something calm. Not warm. Not apologetic. Just controlled. But her eyes gave her away. Sharp. Searching. Calculating. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. That hadn't changed.
Daniel didn't move from the kitchen. He stayed seated, watching. That was new. Claire noticed it immediately. Of course she did. Her gaze flicked from him, to the table, to the folder, then to me. What did you show him? She asked. No greeting, no softness, straight to the point. I didn't show him anything, I said. I let him read. The same words as before, but this time, they landed differently. Claire walked into the kitchen, slow, deliberate. Her heels barely made a sound on the tile. She stopped at the edge of the table, looked down at the paper. Didn't touch it. Not yet. That document is incomplete, she said. Her voice was steady, practiced, almost convincing. It's sufficient, I replied. She let out a quiet breath. Not frustration, adjustment. She was shifting strategy. Daniel, she said, without looking at him, we've already discussed this. No response. She turned. Now she looked at him directly. We went over the paperwork together. He didn't nod, didn't confirm. He just sat there, watching. That's not what this shows, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't waver. That was new, very new. Claire's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A small tightening, a slight pause before her next sentence. This shows part of a process, she said, not the whole thing. And the part before authorization? Daniel asked. Silence. Short, but enough. That was preliminary, she said. Quick, controlled. It's standard. Without her signature, he pressed. There it was, the pressure point. Claire's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. She trusted me to handle things, she said. Past tense again. That pattern hadn't changed. Daniel leaned forward slightly.
That's not what I asked. Silence. Longer this time. Because now, she couldn't redirect as easily. I stepped closer to the table. Not between them, just near, present. Because this wasn't about speaking. It was about positioning. Claire turned back to me. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. There it was again. That word. Complicated. I'm making it visible, I said. Calm, flat, final. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're misunderstanding timing, she said. No, I replied. I'm reading it. Silence. Again, but sharper, more defined. Because now, the lines were clear. Claire reached for the paper, finally. Her fingers moved carefully, like she could still control how it was perceived. She picked it up, looked at it again, slower this time, more precise. That date doesn't mean what you think it means, she said. To me, but also to Daniel. Then explain it, he said. Simple, direct, no hesitation. She opened her mouth, paused, closed it again. That was the first real break. Small, but undeniable. It was part of organizing the documents, she said, less certain now, preparing things in advance. For a transfer that hadn't been approved? He asked. Silence. Long, heavy. Claire placed the paper back down, carefully, too carefully, like it might say something different if she handled it the right way.
You're focusing on the wrong detail, she said. There it was, deflection. No, I said, I'm focusing on the first one. That stopped her, just for a second, because she understood exactly what I meant. The first move, the one that started everything. This isn't about that, she said, her voice lower now, controlled again, but tighter. It is for me, I replied. Daniel looked between us, not confused anymore, not uncertain, just aware. She filed before she had the right to, he said. Not a question, not even to me, to himself. Claire turned to him quickly. That's not accurate. It's documented, he said. Silence. And this time, she didn't correct him immediately. I watched her carefully, because this was the moment, the one where control either holds or slips. She straightened, adjusted her sleeve, reset her posture. I think we're missing the bigger picture, she said. New angle. What picture? Daniel asked. That everything was done to help, she replied. There it was again. Help. Always the same word. I stepped closer to the table, opened the folder. Not fully, just enough. Claire's eyes flicked to it instantly. Of course they did. There's more, I said. Not loudly, just enough. Daniel looked at me, then at the folder, then back at Claire. What else? He asked. Claire didn't answer. She was watching my hands, not my face. That told me everything. I slid one more page out, slowly, placed it on the table, next to the first, aligned, precise. Daniel leaned forward. Claire didn't. Not yet. What is this? He asked. I didn't answer. Not directly. Read it, I said. He did. And this time, it didn't take long. His eyes moved once, twice, then stopped. That's not the same account, he said. No, it wasn't. And this transfer, he continued, this isn't authorized either. Silence. But this one felt different, heavier, final. Claire finally stepped closer, looked down, read it. Her face didn't change immediately, but her breathing did, slightly faster, less controlled. That's a separate matter, she said. Quick, too quick. No, Daniel said. It's not. He looked at her, steady, clear. It's the same pattern. That was it. That was the moment. Claire didn't respond, not right away, because now there wasn't a clean explanation left. I closed the folder, gently. This was never about one document, I said. Silence. It was about sequence, I added. Claire looked at me, really looked this time, not calculating, not adjusting, just seeing. What do you want? She asked. Finally, I didn't answer immediately, because that question only matters once everything else is clear. Daniel didn't look at her. He was still staring at the papers. I think, I said slowly, you already know. Silence. Deep. Unavoidable. Outside, the sun had dropped lower. Shadows stretched longer across the floor. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't, because now there wasn't a version of this left that she controlled, and the part she still hadn't considered was already in motion.
Claire didn't answer my question, not right away. She just stood there, looking at the papers as if they might rearrange themselves into something safer, something cleaner. But they didn't. Paper doesn't lie. It just waits. Daniel didn't move either. His hands rested on the edge of the table, fingers slightly curled, like he was holding on to something invisible. Not control, not certainty, just what was left of it. "What do you want?" Claire asked again, this time quieter. Not softer, just stripped down. Because the usual tone, the one she used to guide conversations, was gone. There was nothing left to guide. I looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her, because for the first time, she wasn't managing the room. She was inside it. "I want things to be accurate," I said. That was it. No list, no demands, just that. She let out a breath. Short, controlled. "That's vague." "No," I said. "It's specific." Silence. Then, "You're not taking the house back," she said. There it was, the real concern. Not the paperwork, not the process, the outcome. "I never gave it away," I replied. That landed. Harder than anything else, because now the narrative she had built didn't hold. Daniel looked at me, then at her, then back at the table. "I didn't sign anything," he said quietly. Not to defend himself, to understand. Claire turned to him. "You didn't need to." And that was the moment. The one she couldn't take back. Daniel blinked. Once. Then again. Slow. Measured. Like something inside him had just shifted into place. "I didn't need to?" he repeated. She didn't answer. Not immediately. Because now, every word mattered. "It was already structured," she said finally. "Careful. Too careful." "Before I agreed?" he asked. Silence. I didn't move, didn't speak, because this wasn't my moment. Not anymore. Daniel leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling, then closed his eyes for a second. "Just one. That's all it takes." "You said we were planning it together," he said. Claire stepped forward. "That's what we were doing. That's not what this shows." He tapped the paper, not hard, just enough. "This shows you started it without me." Her jaw tightened, slightly, barely visible. But it was there. "It was a preliminary step," she said. "For what?" he asked. "To make things easier." There it was again. That word. Easier. Daniel shook his head slowly. Not in anger. In understanding. "For who?" he asked. Silence. Claire didn't answer, because now there wasn't a version of that sentence that worked. I stepped back. Just slightly. Creating space. Because what was happening now didn't belong to me. Daniel looked at the second document again, the one I hadn't shown them until now. His finger traced the line, stopped, then moved again. "This account," he said. "It's not even in her name." No, it wasn't. And the transfer date. He didn't finish, didn't need to. Claire exhaled, slow, controlled, but not steady anymore. "You're misunderstanding the structure," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm finally seeing it." Silence. That was the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. Claire straightened, adjusted her sleeve again, reset, one last time. "This isn't going to hold," she said. To me, not him. I met her gaze, steady, calm. "It already has." She narrowed her eyes. "On what basis?" I reached for the folder, opened it, fully this time, and pulled out the last document, the one neither of them had seen. I placed it on the table, not aligned, not careful, just there. Daniel leaned forward. Claire didn't, not at first. "What is this?"
he asked. I didn't answer. I watched. He picked it up, read the first line, then stopped. That's notarized, he said. Yes. And dated? He looked up, then back down, then up again. That's before everything, he said. Yes. Claire stepped closer now, faster, less controlled. What is that? She asked. I didn't look at her. I looked at Daniel. Read it, I said. He did. And this time, there was no pause, no hesitation. That revokes. He stopped, looked at me. It voids any unauthorized transfer attempt. Yes. Silence. Deep. Complete. Claire reached for the paper. Her hand moved faster now, less precise. She read it. Once. Twice. And for the first time, she didn't speak. Because now, there was nothing left to say. Daniel leaned back, slow, careful, like he was adjusting to something heavier than before. You knew, he said. I didn't answer. Because that word doesn't mean the same thing anymore. I prepared, I said. Claire looked up at me, not sharp, not calculating, just still. You set this up, she said. I shook my head. No. Pause. I finished it. That was the difference. Silence filled the room again, but this time, it didn't feel tense. It felt settled. Outside, the light had shifted completely. Evening now. Shadows gone. Everything clearer. Daniel stood up slowly, looked at me, then at her. This isn't fixable, he said. Claire didn't respond, because she knew. I closed the folder, gently. You said I was making things complicated, I said. She didn't look at me. I wasn't, I continued. I was making them visible. No response. I turned toward the window, looked out one last time. Everything was still there. The street, the houses, the quiet. But inside, nothing was the same. And the part that mattered most? I never raised my voice. I never argued. I just read. And that was enough.